Welcome down to my 9-foot homemade oak bar. Pour yourself a cold one. You are listening to Bucs in the Basement. My name's Chris, and Craig here is the biggest Pirates fan you'll ever meet. Let's talk Pirates baseball now. Welcome to Bucs in the Basement.
Now I see the changes in this town. They change, they say one thing, but then the next day it's different. They change, but they don't know what they want. All they do is change, Going left, going right, travel day, travel night. That's where we'll go. No excuses, no goodbyes, no one cries, no one lies. We'll never know.
I don't even know what to say at this point. An extremely frustrated Pirates fan here. I always try to take the fan cap off. It doesn't always work out. Have been a fan since 1985. I'm not going to say a fan since birth because, I was brought up in this, listening to the games on my grandparents' porch. In 85, that's a memory. It's one of those core memories from anybody that's seen Inside Out that has little kids. I see that in my head. Really started following this team probably around like 1989 when you're getting into Little League and different stuff like that. And you really, know all the players, different stuff. I mean, this has been my passion for 35 years. You guys out there and gals have been listening to me for the past 5 years, which I appreciate immensely. But this last game, this last series, I mean, it didn't break me. I'm not going anywhere. I'm not declaring. I'm not one of those people that's saying I'm leaving Twitter, I'm announcing or anything like that. I'm going to be here, guys. And I'm bringing back someone who unfortunately had to sit with me through the condo Wi-Fi and terrible stuff. The Wi-Fi is good now. I'm in the studio. He's in his studio. This is Scott Jackson at Pirate Takes. Like I said before, he dabbled in the podcasting world. I wish he would do it more because he actually does have some really good takes. A level-headed fan. I think I'm a level-headed fan. A level-headed fan like myself. Scott, I mean, I'm going to ask you, but we all know the answer. How you doing, brother?
Well, I made it through the night, trying to lean on the power of positivity and remembering what things were like about a month ago and how much optimism we had, and maybe things aren't as gloomy as social media would have you believe right now. But yeah, I'm getting by. Thanks for asking. Thanks for checking in on me. I appreciate that.
Yeah, if I could check on every Pirates fan, I probably would at this point in time. Obviously, you because jumping on the podcast, and I appreciate that. But yeah, I mean, I just feel like everybody is kind of maybe a little bit unwell at this point in time. There's been a lot that's been going on. I mean, we were talking when we were setting this up, and I was thinking, oh yeah, we're just going to talk about some positional changes. I mean, obviously we're going to get into that, with Oneil Cruz and some different stuff. But I mean, it feels like that. I mean, if there is a cliff that Pirates X, Twitter, social media was sitting on, I mean, it has definitely fallen off of that. I mean, we probably should go to that first. Is that Oneil Cruz was announced. I mean, kind of like off the cuff, like offhandedly. It was a very weird thing because, I mean, as Pirates fans, you're preparing to watch a game and you hear something and you go, what? Like, for the foreseeable future, IKF is our shortstop. Nick Gonzalez is coming back. He's going to be our second baseman. And Oneil Cruz is a center fielder. I mean, I just want to get I'll give mine, but I want to get yours first. But what was your kind of immediate reaction to that happening?
My immediate reaction was, "Oh, we're doing this now." I really thought that the position change was coming at some point, but I really thought it would happen in the off season. I understand the idea of wanting to get IKF and Nick Gonzalez and replace a very struggling Michael A. Taylor, and getting some some production out of center field. Now, as we remember, when O'Neill Cruz was being, we won't use the term manipulated with his service time, but when they were trying to come up with reasons to keep him in the minor leagues, there's one of the things that they mentioned. But then he kind of got hurt, so he didn't get the outfield reps. But they've been talking about it for quite a while. I guess I'm not entirely surprised that they pulled the trigger on it. The timing was suspicious, and dare I say, maybe a little desperate. But that horse has left the barn. The season is done. There's no grasping to try to make a playoff run. So I guess what do they have to lose at this point?
It's definitely a very weird way to do this. I mean, everybody remembers when he was back in Altoona, was getting some reps in left field at that point in time. I don't know if everybody remembers this, but Cruz actually said that he probably would feel more comfortable in center field, just because when he was growing up, like that was the position he would probably take. I mean, that's one of the more athletic positions. The Pirates are maybe probably thinking at that point in time, Brian Reynolds in center field. Uh, PNC Park has a second center field to a degree in left field over there. So they were thinking maybe that direction. Like you mentioned, the injury, had a forearm injury. That didn't happen. He did play some outfield during spring training. I believe it was in 2022. And I had Jason Mackey on, not too long ago, and I just basically asked him the point blank question. I mean, I put out the stuff that I think at that point in time, O'Neill Cruz had, I think it was like -4 outs above average, which isn't terrible for that position. I mean, everybody will point to the errors, 24 at that point in time. 25, don't question that one just yet. That's not something that outraged about his throw from the outfield. The throw from the outfield was freaking awesome. I mean,
It was, yeah.
just to enjoy of the potential of what that could be. But he just basically shot me down because I was trying to go on what Ben Cherington was saying at that time of, him being at shortstop, and that it wasn't terrible. It wasn't something that, you know, it would, take the WAR down. I mean, right now I looked at it, he's sitting at like 3.3 F WAR. I mean, for the season that he's had, getting up over an 800 OPS, that's, the defense isn't really hurting it that much. But I mean, at the other point in that is that, they've been talking about this for a while. My thing is, I don't mind them doing it right now. And it was a part of what you said was that, okay, the season's lost. You have people out there calling for Billy Cook, Nick York, everybody. Let's see what they have. So I think that's kind of where your mind was going. I don't want to step too much inside your brain, Scott. I don't want to scare you too much by stepping inside there. But my thing is I think you're saying like, okay, the season's gone. Like, why wouldn't we start this now to see what we have with him there? Because at some point in time, you are going to have to fill a hole. You're going to have to either fill a hole at center field or you're going to have to fill a hole at shortstop. IKF, I don't believe, is the answer at shortstop. I think they will realize that he's not the answer at shortstop. I mean, that 106, mile per hour hit from Christian Bethencourt is not the reason for that. It's the years upon years upon years of him playing multiple positions and looking at it and saying shortstop is his worst position. That's where that is going to come from. So you're going to have to fill a hole. And I think that, like, with IKF, I've said this a few times. I feel like that they got IKF because Jared Triolo didn't turn out to what they thought he would be playing all those positions. I believe that they got, Brian De La Cruz because Edward Olivares didn't turn out to be what they thought he would be, which I actually looked back. I mean, Edward Olivares wasn't as bad as, we really thought he was. I think it was like a 73 WRC plus. If I'm correct on that, if I'm not, check me on that, but it's pretty close to there. I mean, especially when you have a guy like Brian Hayes who's sitting in the 60s at the WRC plus. You have Jack Sawinski, who was sitting in right around there. I mean, I think that's where more of the stuff from this year happened. But I mean, yeah, there are, no matter the way you look at it, I mean, you're looking at a team, quote unquote, year 5, year 4.5, year 4B, whatever it would be, and you still have a decent amount of holes. So my question to you, Scott, would be, I mean, where do we fill these holes? Because I don't know if it's from the minor league system. Like, so what holes need to be filled? Like, let's talk through this. Let's have like a little bit of like a brainstorming session. So, like, what holes do you think need to be filled for next year?
Well, it's tough as a Pirates fan because we look and see, the lineups that we saw in 2020, 2021, and now in comparison, you look at it and you're like, well, now we have Nick Gonzalez. Okay, second base is solved, and then we're so glad to have players of these kind of talents. It's almost tough to think of improving over some of these guys. But I think you bring up a great point with Triolo not working out. I thought he was going to be a solid utility player. He, like you said, he was going to play some second, some short, some third. You know, he was going to first. We saw him at first last year. I thought he was going to be the answer there. But when you dig into his numbers and his offensive production, he was very fortunate with his BABIP last year with a 440 BABIP, and this year he's regressed to a 257. So we're kind of seeing that maybe there was a bit of a mirage last year. So, like you said, that was a hole that needs to be filled. The bottom part of the lineup, to answer your question, Henry Davis, expected him to take a big step forward this year. Certainly, we haven't seen that, and I think that you brought up that O'Neill Cruz error quotation. Um, that it's not as much of an error if Henry gets a handle on that. It's going to, in fact, even be a play. Um, and oh, just to circle back on that O'Neill Cruz thing, I think that part of my concern was the statements that he'd made in the past, especially earlier in this season, about wanting to be a shortstop, seeing himself as a shortstop. My concern was his mindset being moved from position. But if he's okay with it, and Derek Shelton is the one that's having those conversations, and like I always say with the Steelers and people talking about Mike Tomlin controlling his team, we don't see what happens in the locker room. We don't see what happens in the clubhouse. We don't see the conversations that are had, the connections that are had between coaches and players. So I'm going to trust the conversations that they have with him more than anything. But yeah, holes. I mean, what are we going to do for first base next year? That's going to be a glaring issue. I'm fine with bringing Rowdy back for another year or two. I think he's really shown that he's resilient, that he can bounce back and make the adjustments that he needs to make and play some defense. But then again, you still need to have a platoon partner for him. I think long term, he has flashes where he hits lefties well. But yeah, the bottom part of the lineup is non-existent at this point, and moving Cruz into center and removing Michael A. Taylor from the equation is a step forward. Alika Williams, you got to get a better bench bat. Just seeing him go up in the ninth inning yesterday, and the whole team was defeated. I understand. You could see it in the way when O'Neill Cruz grounded the second base, and just even though you just had the heartbreaker of a top of the inning, you would expect a guy to hustle that out. But it just seemed like they were defeated, and Alika just kind of fanning at strike three. Yeah, it just I think we need to do better there. But you bring up, York and Cook, and maybe some of those guys are the answer. I really liked those moves that were made.
Yeah, and here's the thing: is we're talking about like Nick Gonzalez, and I was looking earlier today because everybody knows if I'm looking at my phone, nobody has to know what I'm doing. I'm looking at stats. I'm like looking at like different stuff. I mean, I told you before this, Scott, that I listen to every Pirates podcast. I mean, it's not giving them a plug, but like I listen to Bucko Banner. I listen to North Shore 9. I listen to DK's, Daily Shot. I listen to Bridges of October, Pirates Fan Forum. Like, if I missed anybody there, uh, Double Play
Double
podcast.
play.
I
Yep.
listen to, I listen to all those guys. I listen to everything that's out there. But the thing to me was like with Nick Gonzalez, I mean, he has like an 85 WRC plus, but the one thing that he brings is that clutch hitting. I mean, and it's something that we missed for that little point in time there.
And I think that, like we talked about last time I was on, um, where he fit in the lineup. When we talked before, he was hitting cleanup. And I know that he, as somebody who drives in runs, you do want somebody like that in the cleanup position. But I just think that at this point in his career, if you can get him batting fifth or sixth, I think it ends up helping him in the long run. And I'm interested to see what his numbers are going to look like if they can put him in that position in the lineup going forward and reserve judgment to the end of the season.
Yeah, because I mean, here's the thing: you look at his runners in scoring position. When he hits, he's had 74 plate appearances, which is a pretty small sample size, but actually kind of big for a guy that hasn't been up that much this year. I mean, with his injury and stuff, he's hitting 288. The big thing for me is he's driven in 32 runs during that time. So it's like almost like every time, almost, every other time he's up, he is driving in runs. What really stuck out to me when you go down, and I mean, I do baseball reference, I do Fangraphs. I don't, I'm not like a fan of one or another. Neither one is bad or good because there's people who are like, oh, yeah, Fangraphs is better. No, you can find good stuff on either ones. But I was looking on here, is that when he has a guy on second or third, his OPS is over 1,000. When he has a guy on first and third, his OPS is 1.357. I mean, that's a guy that you kind of actually, the Pirates fans like should be drooling over, because I hear stuff of like, why can't guys like shorten their swing when there's somebody on? Why can't guys just look for a pitch that they can hit to a certain direction? I mean, I don't ever believe that Nick Gonzalez is going to be like, competing for like a batting title. And if he is, I apologize, Nicky G. I mean, you're Nicky Bats, you might be able to do that, but like, I don't see him as being that type of guy, but I see him as being a type of guy that can, pick his spots and be that type of player to be in that position when you need it, whether it be as your starting second baseman or whether it be as a bench bat. I mean, that's the other part is like, I mean, there's not, we're talking about holes, we're talking about different stuff like that. Like, I mean, there are positions that are going to be gone after this year. I mean, Michael A. Taylor is, absolutely gone after this year. You're looking at possibly, I would hate to say it, but maybe Connor Joe being non-tendered. I don't know if the Pirates would go that far at this point. If they do, I mean, that will hurt my Connor Joe heart, because everybody knows he's my favorite Pirate right now. And that's my fan, heart. That's not, the head up here thinking about the team. So, I mean, I could see that definitely happening. You said bringing Rowdy back. I mean, you look at the guys that are available in free agency. I mean, for what the Pirates, I mean, honestly are going to pay, because, I mean, you can say this right now. I mean, God, there's that Mark Cuban stuff out there right now. Mark Cuban, be a Pirates fan, but never comment about money like ever again. That's just my opinion. Because, I mean, not that you had the opportunity, but you didn't pursue the opportunity to. So, like, you're not going to buy the Pirates now. So, like, don't comment about anything. That's just my opinion on that. Not Scott's opinion at all. He can give his opinion if he wants to. It's kind of a little bit of a touchy subject, but I mean, I agree with what he tweeted, but it's just that, you can't like come into this like at this point in time. It's almost like you're looking for engagement. I mean, it's like engagement farming. That's pretty much what it is to me. So, I mean, but like, yeah, I mean, bring Rowdy back maybe, but God, this is just so frustrating. I have so many thoughts running through my head. The thing to me is let's go on levels. Andy Haynes, should he be back next year? Probably not. Scott, what do you say?
Yeah, I think it's time to move on from Haynes. And I know that that's not exactly a hot take, but I know that Shelty stepped up and kind of tweaked um, the approach. And you were talking about Nick Gonzalez. I think that part of why he drives in the runs he does is that he's aggressive. The Haynes philosophy is hit your pitch. Wait until they are in a position where they have to give you your pitch, and then you hit it. Where Nicky G is going up and he's swinging because he can't afford to be down 0-2, 1-2. He has too much swing and miss. So if he's gonna ambush that first pitch if he can, and he's gonna drive in runs that way. He's gonna be productive. He's gonna sack flies, whatever he needs to do to drive in those runs. And so I think that when Shelton stepped in and made them more aggressive. I remember them mentioning that on the radio broadcast. That that's when things turned the page a little bit. We had that boost in offense, and I think that's a product of the change. I mean, Shelton's a longtime hitting coach, so I think that the question is, does Haynes reflect Shelton's philosophy? And if that's the case, then we may not see a move. But if Shelton has decided, hey, we need to have somebody that's got a more aggressive approach, then yeah, it's not working. It's not where we saw this. We've seen this with so many one-run games where they've had runners in scoring position. They've had it with for that long stretch where they were losing 10 games in a row. How many times in that stretch did they still have the potential winning run at the plate in the ninth inning? The- And I know we're going to talk about Shelton being on the hot seat, but I think that up till yesterday, even though they had been losing, that's the thing with Shelton. You don't see the players give up. And so I think that there's something there. But yeah, the philosophy, I think, for the hitting has to change. And I think we will see that change.
Here's the thing: is like I know that I don't know if it's a Shelton philosophy. I don't know if it's a Charrington philosophy. I don't know if they're bringing Andy Haynes as the person to bring that in. Like I don't know if we'll ever know that. Do you know what I mean? Like because I think that Eckstein, who he replaced, was a similar hitting. It was you were finding a pitch that was in your zone, and you drive that. It was the same thing with Josh Bell when he had that amazing couple months. It was you only look for that pitch that's in your zone. But the bad part is that once people adjust to that and it's not in that zone, then what do you do? And I don't know if we can credit Haynes for like what Oneil Cruz has done against left-handed pitchers. I don't know if we can give him that credit for that video that he showed Nick Gonzalez of where his hands were at. I don't know how much we can do with that, but I just don't know. I just feel like somebody is going to be on the outs. The thing with Shelton with me, and I know this is like that. It's a microcosm. It's not the macro. Because I mean, I like to look at the team at a like 500, 5,000 foot view as much as I can. But I'm thinking in my head, and I can't get it out of there, of that air yesterday, which is an air by IKF when Christian Bethencourt's hit went underneath, like popped off of his glove. I mean, it would have been a tough play. My thing is you made that statement, Oneil Cruz is moving to center field. IKF is our shortstop. Nick Gonzalez is our second baseman. So, like, IKF is our shortstop. You have possibly the only other guy in the system right now that I would trust to play shortstop in Alika Williams sitting at second base for the entire game because he's playing for Nick Gonzalez. And that's set up by Donnie Kelly and Derek Shelton. So for the people that are wanting Donnie Kelly to be promoted to manager, and I love Donnie Kelly. I think he's a great guy. I think he will at some point in time be able to grow into being that. But you've had a guy that sat by Shelton this entire time, has done stuff that I've absolutely hated, where they sit there and they put out their lineups for a week. And that was probably, we're going to play Nick when he comes back up, but he's going to sit that game no matter what. IKF, who we've mentioned earlier in this podcast, his worst position is shortstop. You have Alika Williams, who is the only person in the system right now that I would trust to play second base, who's like close to that level. I mean, there may be other guys that are lower down. And then you put him at second base and put IKF at shortstop. To me, I know it's a microcosm and we shouldn't be picking about that little type of stuff like that. But like, shouldn't Shelton recognize that? If some idiot in his basement in Crescent Township, Pennsylvania knows this, shouldn't he be like, you know what? Yeah, we kind of mentioned that he would be the shortstop, but like Alika's better. Like, shouldn't we make that change? And that's where I feel like that, like, I haven't been a fan of Shelton's from the beginning. I didn't think that he would be the guy towards the end of this quote unquote rebuild. He's made it farther than I thought he would be. But I've tried to support him. I've, supported the good decisions he's made, the good things he's done. When you put a pitcher in and they don't execute, that's not on him. That's on the pitcher, that type of stuff. But for me, like, that little stuff, it's just like, God, Shelton, what do you think, Scott?
Yeah, I can see that. And to your point about Shelton and Kelly have been, at the hip this entire time. So really, if you're not happy with what Shelton's doing, then you're not going to be happy with Donnie Kelly. You're not going to. It's like, people expected Jeff Bannister to become the manager if Hurdle got fired. Sometimes they just get linked so closely that if you're not happy with that, you just move on. And I have been a Shelton guy. I think that he's very motivational. I think that the issues with those small things, like you mentioned, um, those are the things that are justifiably brought up in criticism of him. Maybe, I ran into him one time at Burn by Rocky Patel. He was super cool. That was, after they beat the Dodgers in what 21, I think that was. So I mean, it's cool. You get that soft spot in your heart when you meet some of these guys, especially me living so far away. I don't run into these guys very often. But I think that right from the beginning, when they first hired him, and they did a little promotional thing where they had him and Joe Musgrove go to Permane Brothers, and they were just chatting, and I was like, man, this is the right guy. But like you, I was afraid that he would be that guy, the John Russell, that would just get him through the rebuild, and then okay, now we're going to be good. Let's get a real manager. So I was happy that he'd get the opportunity, but it is starting to wear a little thin with some of these things. But also, like you mentioned, when he puts a pitcher in the bullpen, what other moves is he going to make? He put Chapman out there. You know, Kyle Nicholas was out there. You bring in the guy who was tied for the lead in NL saves last year, and I know he's had a rough year, but Bednar, it's in there. You know that that's in there. You just keep feeling like he's just going to turn the corner every time he goes out there. That you're going to get the old Bednar, and it just hasn't happened. So I don't know. Looking at the bullpen, like yesterday, what moves he could have made differently that would have saved, until things got blown out at the end. But, to hold on to that win, to get that save, what moves do you expect him to make? Maybe you have an answer for what you would have done in that situation that would have been a little different, that could have locked it down. But I think that the moves that he made were probably the right ones. They just didn't execute, and he was fired up. I don't know if you saw the presser after he looked like he had been drenched. At the end of that, he looked as disheveled as I've ever seen him, and he was fired up. And that kind of passion is not something we typically see out of him, at least on the field and in front of the reporters. But I don't know if it's him fighting for his job, the frustration finally coming out. But I think as mad as I was, and I was tweeting a lot of things at the end of that game, seeing how he reacted and was talking to everybody, he might still have the fire that he needs for this team.
I mean, I did like to see that from him because he's not a guy that shows a lot of emotion all the time. And I'm just going to I don't want to pick apart what you're saying, but just what I'm thinking about here is Aroldis Chapman. I mean, it's not the wrong move. It's absolutely not the wrong move. I mean, I don't know what I could have done differently with that. Aroldis Chapman had not given up a run since August 2nd.
Mhm.
I mean, look back on it, people. I mean, like, obviously people will say, you brought him out to finish and then you had him sit down, you had him come back out, and there's different stuff like that. But I mean, who else are you going to go to? I mean, that's where the stuff is at. With David Bednar, I mean, everybody knows my feelings on this. If anybody's listened to this, I mean, I will restate it again. The worst mistake possible, I wouldn't say the worst mistake they made with him, because there's other mistakes that have been made. The worst mistake they made with him was not trading him at the last trade deadline, just because of the back issues and different stuff. I mean, obviously, velocity is not an issue, control is an issue, but I mean, there's times where you can muscle through that and throw the same velocity. But if stuff is not feeling great, I'm not saying he's injured, but I mean, he's obviously been off this entire year.
I think he's in
So,
his head. I think it's in his head that because he's not typically a walking kind of pitcher. Like you said, the control. I think that he's skittish right now, and he can get ahead of guys, and he's a little skittish about putting them away. And I think that kind
yeah,
of bit him yesterday.
yeah. I mean, he goes to, like, he gets the two strikes, and you're looking for that, like, high fastball at the top of the zone, like the stuff he's normally done, or his curveball that, like, bites and, like, gets there and, like, on the outside or inside wherever he wants to place it. Yes, I mean, I don't know what it is, but it's just absolutely not happening now. But for me, I mean, and it's nothing against David Bednar. Like, I mean, he's been good, but I've been critical when I feel like I need to been critical of him. And with this, it's just that, you know, closers, relievers in general do not have long careers. You got two all-star seasons out of him, and you've gotten good, spots in there. You've gotten bad spots in there because I've pointed out, other stuff. But I mean, he hasn't lasted a full season the entire time. Like, he really hasn't. And this season, I looked back on it, he had good innings in May and June, which equated to about 21 innings so far this year. Other than that, I mean, yeah, you can argue they maybe brought him back too early in April. I probably believe they did, mostly because of, Holderman's sickness and, Majinski's injury. But other than that, like, at this point in time, like, he got going. So what's wrong now? Do you know what I mean? Like, what happened at that point in time? And you had a guy that was, like, at the top of his trading potential. If you're gonna follow any of the other teams, like the Rays, when they're at the top, they trade. When they are not competitive, they trade. And that will get me. I mean, we're talking about the bullpen blowups, and we mentioned Aroldis Chapman. You signed Aroldis Chapman for $10.5 million with the goal to trade him. And I don't know if you believed that this was a competitive team that could make the playoffs. So I'll give you that. When we recorded, right after the trade deadline, they were 55 and 53. Since then, they've gone 8-7, no, 7-18, believe. What is it? Yeah, 7-18. You have to make tough decisions. The Orioles, everybody wants to point to the Orioles. When they did not have what they thought they had, they traded Trey Mancini, their cancer survivor, their guy who was playing well, their guy who had gotten them through their rebuild. They started trading players I mean, if you're a GM, you can't have a heart. if you're an owner, you can't have a heart.
The
Would I
Brewers
like to
trading
keep?
Hader.
Yeah, I mean, you have to make some of those moves. So to me, like, I mean, we could go the whole way up to Charrington, and I mean, we obviously could. The two biggest things for me is the last couple of days, Scott. I've been looking over, the drafts of Ben Charrington because I mean, trades I believe are hit and miss. You will find that diamond in the rough. The Pirates found, obviously it wasn't, Charrington, but they found Brian Reynolds. They found Oneil Cruz. They find some other players. They find David Bednar for 2 years. But a lot of those trades are, I mean, they're in the wash cycle. I mean, they're gone. They're behind us. And that happens for, many more of those teams. A lot of the teams that are built, and even the, Pirates teams of the early, 2010s. Yeah, I mean, everybody will point to, AJ Burnett and Russell Martin, and that may have gotten them over the top, but it was, Andrew McCutchen. It was Neil Walker. It was Pedro Alvarez, for that 2013 season. It was the drafts that kind of helped that, type of stuff happen. I looked back through the Pirates drafts, and I mean, everybody's calling the Pirates a pitching factory, and at this point in time, they probably should be because they have selected so many pitchers.
Hmm.
But then they've put, all of the weight on Henry Davis, Nick Gonzalez, Tamar Johnson, to a lesser degree, a Mitch Jebb. They have not drafted hitters like at all, and especially college hitters. I mean, there's like college hitters. I mean, Charles McAdoo, who we traded, and we got IKF, and I think IKF, if he's using the right ilk, if you use him as the utility player that he is, I think he would be a great player for this team. You're putting him as a starter now. You're Connor Joeing him is pretty much what you're doing.
Hmm.
I mean, he's not been a starter. He's not been a starter caliber player throughout his career. But Scott, I mean, like, look to the draft. Like, try to name another hitter. I mean, I don't. I'm not going to try to make you look silly, but let me try to look at another hitter that they've actually drafted. I mean, you're basically putting it all in. We've picked the right guys instead of picking a bulk of guys and hoping one of them works out, just like they did with the pitchers. I mean, they lucked into Paul Skeens. Jared Jones,
Yeah.
they did well developing. I mean, they've gotten other pitchers and stuff, but they've got a ton of pitchers. Name another hitter they've drafted.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, and I think we all had high hopes for Henry Davis, but is it possible that the legacy of the Henry Davis draft pick is that they picked a guy to go under slot 1-1, and they end up getting Bubba Chandler because they have the extra money? Does that end up being what we look back and see that draft as?
I mean, it could be, man. I mean, it could be. And I want to give you some more time to talk here because I don't want to, control this whole episode. I have you on here because I, want to have you. But I mean, obviously, everybody knows that this is probably going to go over 30 minutes of Bucs. So everybody be prepared for like a little bit of a longer episode here, just because I mean we're in, like I said, quote unquote, year 5 of the rebuild, and we're just all kind of feeling a certain way. And this is a guy who's frustrated, who was just trying to decide whether the team was a 78 win team or an 82 win team. And they could not be, it could be not that far off from a 78 win team, and is this frustrated just because I don't see where the next step is. I don't see that Andrew McCutchen. I don't see that different type of stuff. And I'm just kind of wondering, like Scott, like, where do you, I don't know where you place the blame, or, what we can do from here. But I'm just trying to think of like, like what went wrong this season. I think might be the better question, is like, what went wrong this season that got us to the point where we went from 55-33 to 62-71. I I know the stuff that happened before that. I mean, there was times where I think we should have been winning games if we were hitting more. But honestly, like a lot of the teams put their foot down at the trade deadline. The Diamondbacks, the Padres. You see those teams, the Royals, put their foot down. Like, you know, what went wrong, and like, where do we go from here?
Well, I think scheduling, I think timing, those teams, like you said, they put their foot down. They made a big move. They made big moves for that playoff push. And then we faced them as they were getting those players in and they were getting hot. So, I was at the Diamondbacks game. I told when we recorded last time, I said I was going to go to the game, and that was that first Diamondbacks game where Luis Ortiz gave up all those bases. Three home runs after the Little League home run, um, and two of those home runs were hit right over my head. And so we go from thinking, okay, we're going to the playoffs, we're going to make the push, and then, oh, okay, the wheels are falling off. I think that facing the Diamondbacks and white hot Padres, and losing the games in the fashion that we lost, and then mix the Dodgers in there too. But we still fought. We still fought. This I was thinking today, and I was like, does this season give off 2011 vibes? Now, granted, they were doing better at the beginning of 2011, but also the Pirates went through a stretch, 2 months where they didn't lose 3 games in a row this season. And in the 2011 year, we had that extra innings loss in Atlanta that kind of pushed everything over the edge. And this run where just things were breaking poorly for us, everything that could have gone against the Pirates went against them. Just balls falling in, Colin Holderman, getting hit on some pitches that were good pitches, like that Josh Bell home run that Chapman
Yeah,
gave up. That was a good pitch that he hit. Sometimes good players make good plays, and you just get beat. You give your best, they give their best. They're paid to play too. So, I think the timing of it, I think that the fan base, they went on that long road trip. Everybody was excited when they left, but when they come back, even with a Paul Skeens start, you're still seeing a lot of empty seats. They lost the fans on that road trip, and I think that was the end of it for them. And so I don't think, and again, fighting their hardest in those road trips and one-run losses. There was a number of them on that trip. It seemed like that's what made them so heartbreaking, is that they had the chance to win those games. They weren't just getting blown out every single game. And I think after that, and then having this Cubs series where they gave up so many runs, I think that that's the heartbreak. That's the breaking point. I think that's why you're seeing the fan base the way they are right now. Now, to be a little more cynical, the way they played and how they were in the playoff push, they were in the conversation. It brought a lot of casuals back in, and you're seeing them jump off the bandwagon now. And I think that it's you and I are there. We're on Twitter. We're talking about the Pirates. We're putting our best face out there uh, all the time. Win, lose, rebuild, playoffs. We're fans that are diehards, but we can't discount the fact that there are a lot of people in Pittsburgh, in the Pittsburgh area, that want to see winning baseball, and they don't pay attention unless it's winning baseball. And they've been told, see the Skeens guy, see Jones, Mitch Keller's pitching well, come out to the ball game. And the Pirates are above 500 at the time, and so you got a lot of buzz, a lot of interest, and then the wheels came off by playing some really good baseball teams, and the cracks started showing, and now we're seeing it kind of thin back out again.
yeah, and I can't discount the fact that they played the White Sox, the worst team in baseball, possibly the worst team in baseball history, going into that All Star break, and then coming out against just a tough schedule. And it's not to defend Shelton whatsoever, but when he says, you lose a lot of those games that you're like leading towards the end. I mean, a lot of those games were close. Like there were not a ton of blowouts in there. It wasn't any type of laugher until me, my buddy Ryan, my buddy Joe are sitting there when Roddy Telez is coming out on Saturday night in the Hall of Fame game. There weren't laughers, and now we've had like a couple in a row And then we've had, you know, like I put on our little thing down here is, I think it is the worst loss in my lifetime. I I didn't know it was at the time, but once I saw the things that came out after that, like I think it was Jay Kuda or Coda, I don't know how to pronounce his name, put out there that it was like 1,192 games in the last 7 years where somebody went into this, and then they're saying, you win that game. This hasn't happened to the Pirates since 1974. I think Joe Smeltzer, good dude. I've met him at a game before. Joe Smeltzer, if you ever listen to this, really good dude. Put out there that it was like, around that time. Then it was argued that it might have been 1961. I mean, pretty much at this point in time, you're arguing that this is the worst loss in comeback history that you've watched as a Pirates fan, unless you're, like my mom's age. And I tell everybody, my mom calls me when it stops going bad. And yeah, she gave me a call yesterday. I mean, if everybody was wondering, that's when she's like, okay, I gotta check on Craig to see if he's okay. Because yeah, like you said, Scott, we put our heart and soul into this. And, everybody asks like, why would you be a Pirates fan? And it's like, I love baseball. I've loved it since I was little. And my family brought me into this. And I will be a Pirates fan this year, next year, and whatever. I don't know what's going to happen, but I really had, like I said before, I didn't have high hopes for this year, but it just kind of seems like different stuff has happened.
They raised my hopes.
They did. And the other part is, Brian De La Cruz, I looked at it, I will say, from when we were talking before, I was a person that was not extremely happy about, the move, and we'll see what happens. A lot of people, in the beginning, kind of just, said, okay, he's terrible. He had a negative 35 WRC plus through his first 35 plate appearances. Over his last 55 plate appearances, he's had a 110 WRC plus. You'll look at that and see like, not a great hitter, but it kind of seems like, Alex Stumpf put stuff out there. Maybe he was pushing too much. Maybe he's made some changes. Maybe that's Andy Haynes. I don't know. Maybe it's him. Maybe it's, Christian Moreno. There's all kinds of other people that could put that stuff in there, but he has started to hit better. And the one thing I will notice is like IKF, I believe since he's come to the Pirates, has like a 62 WRC plus. There's been like big hits and different stuff here and there, but like I think it's another one of those things where I said, he's my favorite player, Connor Joe, but maybe he's been Connor Joe. It's just overused. Different stuff. You're asking for too much from him. But I don't know, Scott. This whole season has been very goofy. Making declarations that we're competing for stuff, and yeah, you've had contending in games, but are we looking at a frustrating off season? Like, what are we looking for as we close up the show? Obviously, over 30 minutes of Bucs. Sorry, guys. Here,
bonus Bucs today.
Bonus Bucs. We needed to freaking vent on this. We absolutely did. Scott, if you had to, I'm going to give you the reins. I'm going to give you the reins here for the last, let's say, 5 minutes of the show. If I give you the reins, what are you doing in the offseason to make this team a contender? Because you've mentioned, 2011, 2012. We've both lived through that. Some of these Pirates fans that are jumping on this, were, my age in 1992, or are, just coming on to this. What would you do to push them from the 2011, 2012 Bucs to the 2013, 14, and 15 Pirates? And unfortunately, we do not have Andrew McCutchen, as we were talking about before the show, MVP caliber candidate. And I do have to throw in there, I may go nuts on Twitter about the people that are tweeting about the Royals. I may have to, Scott, because I will show them that you are a Pirates fan and not a Major League Baseball fan because you do not have Bobby Witt Jr. That guy is freaking amazing. I love watching him play. You don't have Andrew McCutchen. So what do you do to maybe try to get that team? And whatever you say, Scott, is not the wrong answer because I mean we're all searching here, man.
Yeah, I think that beginning of the year, the same kind of question I would have said you needed your AJ Burnett. But I think that that fiery attitude. I think we have that in Paul Skeens. I know he's not a veteran by any stretch, but I think that he is going to be vocal. He has a winning mindset, and he's going to push guys to do that. I think that to compare it to those teams, you might need your Russell Martin. You he came in as a catcher, and he just took the reins of that team, and he set them up to be a winning team. And so I think that maybe Joey Bart can solidify that catcher position. I know that that's another thing with him getting hurt. Some of these injuries that we've seen have altered. I mean, he's one of the hottest hitters we had, and he goes down and he's hurt. Is yesterday any different if he's the DH? And I just don't know. But I think that talking about the Pirates being a pitching factory, um, as Pirate fans, we're almost conditioned to hoard prospects and value our prospects because we're just waiting for those guys to break through. I mean, how many first round draft picks did we go through that we thought, or young prospects even? I won't just limit it to first round picks. Um, that did we have such high hopes for, and then they flame out? Um, remember go back to like Chris Benson to the the high hopes we had for Chris Benson that didn't go anywhere. I just think that as time goes on, we need to have some of those young arms traded away to get the bats, proven bats. You can't just trade prospect for prospect and expect it to go to the playoffs. You need to trade some of these promising arms, whether it be a Harrington, whether it be, maybe if Solometo can get things figured out. I would hope that Bubba is untouchable, but hey, at this point, to get to the playoffs, I don't think you should take any name off the table. I think that getting established bats via trade, because we know that Nutting doesn't like free agency. He said, on the record that free agency is a losing game. I don't see them making a big splash there, obviously. But maybe you do trade and you get some guys that can solidify this lineup. But it just seems like, as a Pirates fan, we're so pessimistic. But Brian De La Cruz comes in, you're expecting, and I think we were on the same page there with not being the happiest with that move. Um, but from what I hear, he's a very streaky hitter. So maybe he's on a hot streak now. Maybe he can make a difference. We've got control over him. He's got a plus arm in the outfield if he throws to the right bases, which is a pet peeve of mine. Oneil Cruz, I can understand if he throws to the wrong base because he's a shortstop. But if you are a major league right fielder and have been playing that position for years and you have that kind of arm, no excuses to be allowing runners to move to third because you're trying to throw somebody out at the plate when you don't have a shot. But yeah, anyway, to answer the question, I think that the pitching is pretty well set in the rotation. I think you need to solidify the bullpen as best as you can. Of course, we have Moretta coming back. Um, does Oviedo go into the bullpen next year, working back from Tommy John? What do you do with Luis Ortiz? He shows flashes of brilliance, and then he gets bit with the long ball. Really, that is he a bulk guy? It seems like a majority of his problems come in the first inning. Is there something to that idea of an opener? Is he proof that some guys just can't handle the first inning? I really, I guess if I had the answer, I'd be working in the front office down in Federal Street. But I think as a fan that looks at it, I think that taking some of the pitching and turning it, and of course that's when the injury bug bites you when you do that and you diminish some of your surplus pitching. But I do think that they need some steady bats, and maybe you move on from Hayes. See if he doesn't have that bad of a contract. Maybe you just open up a spot and you go and you get a power hitting third baseman and sacrifice the defense for the bat. Maybe you go get your Pedro Alvarez and you just kind of push those chips in. I think that Charrington's going to get to the point where he's going to start seeing his job in jeopardy, even if it's only in his own mind. And you see maybe, hopefully, he doesn't pull the same kind of things that Huntington did at the end, like Chris Archer. I think that was a last gasp desperation to try to keep that window open and save his own job. And unfortunately, we have to keep hearing about that all the time. But I think that, yeah, you just need production. You need offensive production, and that has to be the focus next year. And they have to spend some of these resources that they've been hoarding, both in prospects and in cash.
A lot of that makes way too much sense. I think that somebody mentioned it. I don't know who it was. I wish I could give them credit. Is that, I like, it's almost like Charrington is like too cautious. I don't want him to be, overly exuberant. I don't want him to, be a fan like we are and like throw out these trades that could happen. But I feel like he's overly cautious of the stuff that could happen. I mean, earlier in the show, I mentioned like Aroldis Chapman. I mean, you got him, I believe, so you could trade him.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that at some point in time, you should have traded David Bednar. I mean, you mentioned the Hayes stuff. I mean, if somebody would take on that contract to be able to get something back, I mean, maybe. My other thing is just he's more of a guy that plays for the first few months of the season, sits out for a month. I don't know if you can build that in. I don't know if that exists, kind of within Major League Baseball, because it kind of seems like that's where, he is able to hit his stride. But I mean, the biggest part here for me is that, I mean, it's just so freaking frustrating. And I mean, it obviously is, because I feel like that, I mean, there are a lot of those pieces there. I mean, with the pitching, it's absolutely, immense. I don't know if it's Marine. I don't know if it's, bringing in Dewey Robinson for him to be the advisor, because he was, the pitching coordinator within the Tampa Bay Rays system. I don't know if it's him drafting 75 pitchers a draft, and obviously that's an exaggeration, and these are the guys that are working out. Because that's what it kind of seems like whenever somebody goes away. I mean, obviously, Patrick Riley is trying to trade away, and then my boy from West Virginia, Mountaineers baseball, huge baseball fan, West Virginia right here, that he comes out and is like showing out. It's just that there's so many of them. That's the thing that's getting to me right there, is just like, obviously you've drafted, like, not an exaggeration, you have 5 rounds in your first draft. After that, you have 20 rounds. So, and you've drafted not that many hitters. So something may work itself out there. I mean, everybody knows we'll be here. I'll be here. Hopefully Scott will come back. I mean, we've talked for an hour on this and a few minutes before that, and you guys get to listen to all of it. For those of you that don't, please go follow Scott Jackson at Pirate Takes. I'm trying to get him to rejuvenate his podcast if he can, because he actually does have a lot of good stuff to say. Scott, thanks, brother. I appreciate this, man.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. It's always a pleasure to come and talk Bucs with you. And I'm here anytime you want to vent, anytime you want to talk Bucs. more than happy to hop on. Thank you so much.
Now I see the changes in this town. They change, they say one thing, but